Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
I'm Jason Miller. Tonight on the Evan-Miller Report, dozens of Jordanian fighter jets have bombed ISIS training centers following the death of that Jordanian pilot. We'll have the latest on that tonight. A senior al-Qaeda militant has been killed by a U.S. drone strike in the south of the country. Also tonight, President Obama says he wants to seek war authorization to continue to fight ISIS. But that is coming with some resistance from Republicans. In Ukraine tonight, a desperate diplomatic push is underway tonight to prevent an already dangerous conflict into descending into a worse-off war. In Nigeria, their influential Council of State has decided to press ahead with presidential elections on the 14th. And on tonight's program, we have an exclusive interview with one of the survivors of the Columbine shootings that happened 16 years ago. State Representative Patrick DeVille from Castle Rock, Colorado joins us to talk about his new legislation that will allow teachers with concealed weapons permits to carry firearms in Colorado's public schools. We're glad you're with us tonight. All those stories and more, plus Corey Evan.
Looking forward to your interview, Jake. I have more updates on the TransAsia plane that went down in Taiwan. A Girl Scout selling cookies was shot in a drive-by incident and has captured the hearts of America, including mine. For those of you waiting for Radio Shack to go bankrupt, well, it's finally happened. Needles found in a Burger King meal? That's what a military man claims in lawsuits across America. And Amy Pascal is stepping down from her post at Sony Pictures. All those stories and more coming up on the Evan-Miller Report, your conservative news source. Jay, start the theme now.
Live from Southern California, this is the Evan-Miller Report. Jason Miller with news and politics, Corey Evan with business and entertainment. This is the Evan-Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio. Here now, Jason Miller.
And a very good evening on this Thursday, February the 5th, 2015. I'm Jason Miller. Thank you so much for being with us. And as we stated, State Representative Patrick DeVille from Castle Rock, Colorado, will be joining us at the bottom of the hour at 8:30 Eastern, 5:30 Pacific Standard Time after we conclude all the news headlines here on tonight's report. And we should note that there is no entertainment report tonight other than the news from Sony Pictures tonight, which Corey will have in business news tonight due to our expanded coverage tonight on that interview tonight right here on the Evan-Miller Report. And, of course, Corey will be back in a couple minutes with the latest on the news about that Taiwanian plane that went down earlier in the week. Give us the very latest on that and some of the day's other news. But first tonight, ladies and gentlemen, we start in Jordan, where dozens of Jordanian fighters bombed Islamic State training centers and weapons storage sites Thursday, intensifying attacks after the militants burned to death a captured Jordanian pilot. As part of the new campaign, Jordan is also attacking targets in Iraq, said Foreign Minister Nasir Judai. Up to now, Jordan had struck ISIS targets in Syria, but not Iraq as part of the U.S.-led military coalition. We said we are going to take this all the way. We are going to go after them, whether they are, and we're doing that, Judai told Fox News. Again, asked if Jordan was now carrying out attacks in both countries, he said, quote, "That's right, today more than Syria than Iraq, but like I said, it's an ongoing effort. They're in Iraq, and they are in Syria, and therefore you have to target them wherever they are." The militant group controls about one-third of each of Syria and Iraq, both neighbors of Jordan. In September, Jordan joined the U.S.-led military alliance that has been carrying out airstrikes against the militants. The Jordanian military said dozens of fighter jets were involved in Thursday's strikes on training centers and weapons storage sites. State TV in Jordan showed footage of the attacks, including fighter jets taking off from air bases and bombs setting off large balls of fire and smoke after impact. It showed Jordanian troops scribble messages in chalk on the missiles. "For you, the enemies of Islam," read one message. The military statement read on state TV was entitled, "This is the beginning, and you will get to know the Jordanians," an apparent warning to ISIS. It says the strikes will continue until we eliminate them. Jordan's King Abdullah was paying a condolence visit to the family of the pilot, Lieutenant Mahd al-Kashbi, in southern Jordan, wherein the fighter jets roared overhead. The king pointed upward toward the planes as he sat next to the pilot's father, Safail al-Kashab. Al-Kashab told assembled mourners that the planes had returned from strikes over Raqqa, the de facto capital of the militant self-declared caliphate. His son had been captured near Raqqa when his F-16 fighter jet went down back in December. And of course, this is all in response from earlier this week when ISIS displayed the video of the killing of the pilot on outdoor screens and were all caught to the chants of "God is great" from some in the audience, according to another video posted by militants. Also, Thursday, Jordan released an influential jihad cleric, Abu Muhammad al-Meski, who was detained in October after speaking out against Jordan's participation in the anti-ISIS coalition, according to his lawyer. All right, folks, and we'll keep you up to date on the latest with the Jordanians bombing those ISIS targets on our Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan-Miller Report, and of course on our Twitter page @EM Radio Report. Corey Evan will be keeping those social media websites updated throughout the day tomorrow, and throughout this evening as well, I should say. A senior al-Qaeda militant has been killed by a U.S. drone strike in the south of the country. The group has said in a Twitter posting. Shal Harik al-Nariri was among 4 people killed in the January 31st strike in Shoal province. There have been at least 3 such strikes this year. Al-Nariri recently appeared in an al-Qaeda video praising January's attack on a French magazine, Charlie Hebdo. He was among the group's few public faces and had threatened more attacks. He was quoted as saying, "It is better for you to stop your aggression against the Muslims, so perhaps you will live safely. If you refuse but to wage war, then wait for the glad tidings," he said in a January 9th video after the French attacks. Al-Qaeda in the Arab Peninsula said on their Twitter account that al-Nariri and 3 other militants were killed in a Crusader American drone strike against the car in the Saweed area of Shoal province. Back here at home, President Obama is poised in the next couple days to ask Congress for a new authority to use U.S. military force against ISIS militants, according to the White House today. But the top Republican in Congress warned it won't be easy to pass the measure, and it will be up to Obama to rally support from lawmakers and the public. House Speaker and BS artist John Boehner said, quote, "His actions are going to be an important part of trying for us to get the votes to actually pass an authorization. This is not going to be an easy lift." Meanwhile, White House spokesman and BS artist Josh Earnest responded that the administration is dedicated to getting a new authorization with support from Republicans and Democrats. That's even though Obama's urged new authorization isn't legally necessary and has been ordering airstrikes on militant strongholds in Iraq and Syria for months. Earnest continued saying, quote, "The president believes it sends a very powerful signal to the American people, to our allies, and even to our enemies, that the United States of America is united behind this strategy to degrade and ultimately destroy ISIS." Using an acronym for the Islamic State group, he said ISIL. I used ISIS, ladies and gentlemen, just to be clear. He continued saying, quote, that across branches of government and even across political parties, even in this divided time in our nation's political history, at least that Democrats and Republicans are committed to this very important task. Earnest declined to discuss specific provisions being discussed, such as how long the authorization will last, what geographical areas it will cover, and whether it will allow for the possibility of ground troops. He said the details are still being worked out with lawmakers from both parties, with hopes of coming up with authorizations that can draw bipartisan support. And of course, stay with us. We'll keep you up to date on the latest regarding that authorization. Meanwhile, a Minnesota man who left the U.S. back in 2007 and joined the terrorist group Al-Shabaab in Somalia was released from federal prison today, but is now in the custody of U.S. immigration officials. Ashtaf Yusuf Issei, 31, is to be detained pending the outcome of removal proceedings before an immigration judge. A U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement official said. Issa, a legal U.S. resident but not an American citizen, is among 22 young Somalian men who left Minnesota since 2007 to join the terror group in Somalia. He eventually returned to the U.S. and was arrested back in February 2009 at the Seattle-Tacoma International Airport as he was trying to go to Tanzania. He pleaded guilty in 2009 to one count of providing material support to terrorists. He was sentenced in 2013 to 3 years in prison and is released from a federal facility in Rochester. Took into account credit for time served and good time. His attorney Paul Ng said he was working to resolve Issa's immigration status. Ng said Issa would likely go live in Seattle with his family if he's allowed to stay in the U.S. All right, ladies and gentlemen, moving on to Ukraine tonight, where the leaders of France and Germany are due in Moscow tomorrow to try to persuade Russian President Putin to sign up for a new peace plan. There are also growing indications that the U.S. might send arms to Ukraine, and NATO is expanding the deployment of a new rapid reaction force in Eastern Europe as a direct result of what it calls Russian aggression. For more on this story, we're going to go to the ITV News' European editor, James Mates, as he reports on the continuing situation in Ukraine tonight.
This is a war waged throughout eastern Ukraine in which the latest and most sophisticated weapons of war are fighting and, as here, frequently destroying each other. In a Europe where all-out war was supposed to have been condemned to history, the 5,000 civilian dead are at last shaming a continent into action. The leaders of France and Germany today launching an extraordinary joint peace mission to Kiev and tomorrow Moscow in search of common ground around which to build a ceasefire. The US is also involved. Secretary of State John Kerry flying into a frigid and snowbound Kiev with the now very real prospect that the US could soon start arming the Ukrainian forces.
We want a diplomatic resolution, but we cannot close our eyes to tanks that are crossing the border from Russia and coming in to Ukraine.
Today we are facing another growing escalation of violence by terrorists directly supported by Moscow.
It is perhaps that fear of escalation more than anything that has spurred France and Germany into action. Because as they were talking in Kiev, NATO was meeting in Brussels to agree a series of measures intended to deter the Russians from spreading this conflict beyond Ukraine. The NATO Rapid Reaction Force in Eastern Europe will be more than doubled from 13,000 troops to 30,000, an extra 1,000 coming from the UK. And there will be another 5,000 on standby that can be deployed within days. NATO fighter jets already patrol the skies above Lithuania, Latvia and Estonia. Now NATO's regional HQ in Poland is going to be expanded, with 6 new command centres to be set up in NATO countries that border Russia.
The 4 Typhoons will be based in Estonia and will, I hope, play a major part in deterring some of the aggressive Russian air activity we've seen recently.
Tomorrow it will be the turn of President Putin in Moscow to hear what Angela Merkel and François Hollande have to offer. There has been serious escalation already this year. Without a deal soon, it could get a great deal worse.
And that was James Mates reporting on the escalation in Ukraine tonight. The U.S. is still deciding whether to send arms over to the Ukrainians. Nigeria's influential Council of State has decided to press ahead with presidential elections on February the 14th, rejecting calls for a postponement. Nigeria's National Security Advisor has called for a delay to allow more time for voter card distribution. The country is also facing mounting attacks from Boko Haram's militant group, but Imo State Government Roscus Archra said election officials had insisted they were very ready. President Goodluck Jonathan is facing a strong challenge from former military ruler Mahatma Gandhi in the vote expected to be the most tightly contested since military rule ended back in 1999. I'll be back in a couple minutes, ladies and gentlemen, to talk about a Brazilian girl who was eaten by piranhas and found dead. We'll have that story and more, but first, let's go over to Corey Evan. He has some of the day's other news tonight. Corey, take it away. Corey Evan, do we have you, sir?
Thank you very much, Jay.
Okay, looks like we
rescue
have
teams
lost
in
Corey
Taiwan
Evan once again. So, I apologize, ladies and gentlemen. As we say, technology sometimes is an issue, and sometimes it's not perfect. Let's go ahead and try one more time for Corey Evan.
Can you hear me now, Jay?
Yes,
can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
There we go. Thank you. I was just about to give you an update on the...
All right, ladies and gentlemen, I do certainly apologize. Corey Evan is having a signal problem out of Los Angeles tonight, so what we're going to do, folks, is at this particular time we're going to go ahead, take a break, and we'll be right back after these messages, and we will try to reconnect, and I do apologize, ladies and gentlemen. We'll be right back.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
How you doing? John Grant here. When I'm not slaving over a hot microphone on the 405radio.com Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern, I check out Sean and Clint here at Sackheads Radio. We all appreciate the best political bloggers, writers, and commentators. We either get them on our shows or we make fun of them, as it should be. So check us out live Saturdays at 10 a.m. Eastern or forever on the podcasts on the 405radio.com.
This is Tammy Jackson, inviting you to join me on the Tammy Jackson Show every Tuesday night at 7 p.m. Pacific on the 405radio.com. Put down that remote and tune into the show that covers politics, guns and the Second Amendment, religious liberties, sanctity of life, the military, and more. I host newsworthy guests and work hard to be a conservative radio show that's not like all the others. So save Tuesday nights at 7 p.m. Pacific for me, Tammy Jackson, on the 405media.com.
Hello, I'm Paul, a student at Hillsdale College. Here is my professor, Dr. Larry Arnn, on the separation of church and state.
America's founders believed in the separation of church and state, in that the country was not to have an official religion or an official sect. But that did not mean that government was to be hostile to religion, or even indifferent to religion, as many today argue. In fact, America's founding document, the Declaration of Independence, includes both a reference to God as the author of the laws of nature and a confident assertion that human beings are endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. Far from being hostile or indifferent to religion, America's founders understood the theology of the Declaration to be an essential part of the education of citizens.
This Constitution Minute was brought to you by Hillsdale College. To join the national conversation on the Constitution, go to constitutionminute.org.
Hi, this is Rooster from Outcry Radio. Catch me here on Blog Talk Radio every Saturday night at 11 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, or follow my blog. Now, back to the Sackheads.
Conservative media done right. You're listening to the SHR Media Network.
Radio.
Let's get back to the Evan-Miller Report on SHR Media and Pundit Press Radio.
welcome back to the Evan-Miller Report. I'm Jason Miller. Still waiting to get back with Corey Evan in Los Angeles. We're still trying to work out those technical issues tonight, and I do apologize once again for those. If we do get Corey Evan back in the next couple minutes, of course, we'll take that for you here. Meanwhile, a 6-year-old girl has been found dead in Brazil after being surrounded and devoured by a large shoal of piranhas. Family members said she was with her grandmother and 4 other children in a canoe which capsized in a storm. Her grandmother managed to bring the other children back into the boat, but was not able to reach the victim, named by local media outlets as Andre Moniz. A group of townspeople in northern state of Para helped to search for the girl but found her unresponsive. The incident happened in the Moruki River near the town of Mont Algeri on the afternoon of the 27th of January. Ecuador has announced a state of emergency in the Galapagos Islands a week after a cargo ship with hazardous materials ran aground there. The Florina, which ferries food and other supplies to the UNESCO World Heritage Site, was also carrying 45,000 liters of fuel, also known as 10,000 gallons worth of fuel. Booms have been used to contain a fuel spill in the pristine waters. The islands, famous for the unique flora and fauna, lie some 1,000 kilometers or 600 miles off Ecuador's Pacific coast. The emergency will allow authorities to have immediate financial means to deal with the situation in Galapagos National Park, spokesman told the AFP news agency. Moving on to Australia, where they are dealing with a heat wave. Experts warn as an emergency crews are battling raging bushfires in the west of the country. Western Australia, the Northern Territories, and parts of New South Wales and Victoria will see temperatures near or above 104 degrees Fahrenheit, or 40 Celsius as they use Celsius over in the European countries. It comes as Western Australia has experienced one of its worst seasons for brush fires. Fire crews say the largest blaze near the town of Northcliffe is still raging, but rain has helped contain some of those flames. Smoke from the fires was reported to be blanketing the city of Perth on Friday. The Australian Bureau of Meteorology said a very large and slow-moving mass of hot air currently over Western Australia was causing a buildup of heat. Severe heatwave conditions are forecast to spread to the east, with the Northern Territory seeking temperatures well above their average over the weekend, it said. Southern New South Wales and northwestern Victoria in Australia are also likely to be affected. All right, folks, moving on to some DC news now briefly tonight. The poor screening led the IRS to rehire hundreds of former employees with records of bad behavior, including falsifying forms and unauthorized access to taxpayer information, an internal government watchdog found. Auditors found the Internal Revenue Service between 2010 and 2013 gave jobs to 323 former employees who had displayed unsavory conduct during prior stints at the agency, according to the U.S. Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration on Thursday. The audit looked at roughly 7,000 workers rehired in the period to fill mostly temporary positions. Among the 323, 5 of the rehired workers had serious misconduct issues, a category that includes threats and sexual harassment. Another 5 had willfully failed to file federal tax returns. 17 falsified employment forms or other documents. Based on the types of performances and conduct issues, we identified rehiring certain employees presents increased risk to the IRS and taxpayers, said J. Russell George, the Inspector General for Tax Administration. The watchdog recommended that the IRS consider more than thorough screening during its hiring process. And over to Florida tonight, where their governor is embroiled in a scandal at the start of his second term. Republican Governor Rick Scott is off to a rocky start in his second term in office, faced an extraordinary meeting on Thursday with Florida's cabinet in which he admitted botching the ouster of the state's top police administrator. Since his narrow victory over former Governor Charlie Crist back in November, Scott has run into a series of controversies. In the past month, Scott was rebuked by the state Republican Party, which had rejected his choice to lead the party and instead elected State Representative Blaise Njonya in an unheard-of snub for a newly re-elected governor. Last week, former state prisons director Michael Cruz, who had been ousted by Scott, accused the governor of neglecting staff, shortages, and crumbling facilities in the Department of Corrections. All right, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to take a short break, but when we come back...
Some of America's bravest warriors are returning home wounded. Here's one of them.
My name is Norberto Lara. I served for 11 years in the United States Army. While I was on a combat patrol in Baqaba, Iraq, a rocket-propelled grenade took my arm off at the shoulder. When I came home, I felt alone. My family was around me, but I couldn't talk to them about what I'd seen and what I'd done. I remember just thinking, man, the way I am right now, I don't want to live. I was discharged from the Army, and I've been working with the Wounded Warrior Project since 2007. You don't have to be severely wounded to be with the Wounded Warrior Project. We do have a lot of guys that have post-traumatic stress disorder. Being able to share your story, I guess it kind of helps you wrap your mind around what did happen over there. Just because you have left the military doesn't mean your life is over. Because when these guys are coming home, I'm kind of leading and training them. Instead of for combat, I'm leading and training them to heal. If I come away with anything from Wounded Warrior Project, it's them giving my life back. My name is Norby, and yes, I do suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder, but I'm okay.
Don't suffer in silence. Contact woundedwarriorproject.org.
And welcome back to the Evan-Miller Report. The Columbine High School massacre school shooting that occurred on April 20th, 1999 at Columbine High School in Columbine in an unincorporated area of Jefferson County in the state of Colorado. In addition to the shootings, the complex and highly planned attack involved a firebomb to divert firefighters, propane tanks converted to bombs placed in the cafeteria, 99 explosive devices and bombs wrecked in cars. The perpetrators, 2 senior students, Eric Harris and Dylan Kiploy, murdered a total of 12 students and 1 teacher. They injured 21 additional people, with 3 others being injured while attempting to escape the school. The pair then committed suicide. Now, 16 years later, one of the survivors of that shooting is a lawmaker in the state of Colorado. His name is Patrick Neville from Castle Rock, Colorado. He was elected to office back in November 2014. On Monday, he introduced gun legislation that would allow teachers with concealed weapons permits to carry firearms in Colorado public schools. Please welcome, ladies and gentlemen, Patrick Neville. And we just had Patrick here. Let's see if we can get him back on the line, because I know we had him here. Let's try one more time. And I do apologize about the technical issues, ladies and gentlemen, tonight, but we were having those issues with Corey earlier. Hopefully we can get him back. And we're just going to go ahead and put this on live here.
This is Patrick.
Okay, Patrick, we got you back. Sorry about that. Technology's given us a bit of an issue today. Just introduce the audience to you here. So welcome to the program. And I have to say, you're a very brave person in trying to introduce this legislation over in the state of Colorado. Colorado's been on the top notch of the headlines the past few years, especially with that Colorado being the first state to pass marijuana legislation. So Colorado has had its share of national news in the past couple years. But first off, before we get to talk about your gun legislation, just want to give people a little bit of a background for you. Of course, you survived the Columbine shootings, but you also served as a captain in the U.S. Army, was awarded a Bronze Star Medal, and you currently serve on the Colorado State Veterans and Military Committee and Transportation and Energy Committee as well. Now, before we get over to the current legislation, can you take me back to that day back in April of 1999 and describe to the audience who may have just been seeing this story on television or reading it in the newspaper the next morning, tell us what it was like that day.
Yeah, well, it was definitely a strange day, to say the least. So I was outside and was able to escape rather quickly, but I think the overwhelming fear was as we waited for hours and hours on end and trying to get a hold of different friends and didn't know where they were at, and we actually created a staging place in my original elementary school, and that's where we kind of gathered and met with folks. And I'll never forget one father that I grew up with, his son, all throughout elementary school, and really searching frantically for his son and couldn't find his son. And we kind of thought at that point that, it wasn't a good sign. So it was definitely an entire day of anguish and fear.
I found it interesting because I was, of course, a child at this particular time. But if you read back in the history books and listen to conservative media these days, after that day over at Columbine, Democrats really took the approach in really trying to enforce gun control laws here in the United States following that shooting, and they certainly used what happened in Columbine as a political step in trying to get those gun control laws passed throughout the nation. And Colorado has been known for passing many gun control laws, and even here in the state of California, we've been known to pass a few gun control laws ourselves here in the state of California. Now, let's fast forward to this Monday. You, of course, as we mentioned, are now a state representative over in Colorado. You represent Castle Rock over there, and you're introducing legislation that would give teachers the right to carry firearms into the classroom. Why don't you give us a little bit more details on what this law would do and how it would protect teachers and, of course, the kids inside the classroom?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, as was the case in 1999, we keep putting forward more and more gun control measures, but these flashy signs just don't seem to deter the criminals intent on doing harm for our children. So my bill would allow any law-abiding citizen who possesses a concealed carry permit, and there's a process to go through to make sure that you're law-abiding and you get a background check and fingerprints before you get a concealed carry permit. And if you have a concealed carry permit, you would be authorized to bring that in with you to protect our children.
Okay, Patrick, now I'm going to play devil's advocate here for a moment. Your Democratic colleagues over in Colorado, and even Democrats nationally, they're going to come out and say, okay, you bring these guns inside these schools, you have these teachers lock them up in their desk. What is to prevent from a student going to that desk, pulling a gun out, and doing another type of shooting that was like the Columbine shootings back in 1999? And I know some people may be a little sympathetic to you, considering you are a survivor from Columbine, but there's many others who may not think that same way and say that you are initially spelling disaster out in the public schools over in Colorado if this bill is passed.
Well, I would say, first off, we have thousands and thousands upon people here in Colorado that do have concealed carry permits, and they exercise that right daily, and we don't see instances where that happens. And then secondly, I think through terms of employment, the school districts could decide to add certain levels of training. I mean, there's already a certain mandated minimum amount of training you have to go through before you get a concealed carry permit, and usually in those classes, that kind of issue is discussed. It's security and making sure you're not printing your gun. So I don't think most students would probably never even know that the teacher or staff member might even have a firearm. And secondly, I think that they're going to be responsible adults, just like all the other concealed carry permit holders we have here in Colorado.
Now, have you gotten any endorsements for this legislation since this has been announced earlier in the week on Monday?
Yes, absolutely. It's been very popular, and it's been kind of amazing myself. I've lost touch with a lot of my friends from high school, but since hearing about it, they've actually reached out and thanked me for moving it forward and said they support me. And so that's been kind of a fun process myself to go through and reconnect with some of these people.
And Patrick, I'm very surprised, someone like you who had to go through Columbine back in 1999. Some people who would survive something like this wouldn't be doing something like this. I've seen people who've gone through these type of disasters want to come out and put stricter gun control laws and get into the community and try to stop something like this. You are going a complete reverse route. And the way you're talking now, it seems you are very concerned about the teachers and making sure that these kids get protected. Because going back here, I researched the Columbine shootings throughout the day, and my goodness, the amount of people killed here is amazing. And obviously, so many were dead by these two students here because the teachers were not able to defend themselves, and on top of it, law enforcement was distracted because these two boys, however knowledgeable they were, despite what their psychological mental state was at the particular time that they were shooting, they thought up of almost every scenario in trying to distract law enforcement from coming to the aid of these children.
They did, yeah. They thought up of just about every scenario, and that's why they actually planned for the uniformed police officer that was stationed at our school. And that's why I think my plan here actually would provide an extra added level of security to our students, because it would add that element of surprise, because they wouldn't know who may or may not be armed. It's similar to an air marshal in an airplane. You don't openly say who the air marshal is, but there's quite often ones there, and there's a reason why we don't say who it is.
Sure. Can you talk about a little bit more about how the teacher would have to go through this? Because obviously, most parents, if they're thinking that the teacher is going to be armed there, they're going to probably want some sort of psych evaluation on the teacher to make sure that the teacher is mentally fit to carry a firearm. At least some people. Some parents within the school would think that. Also, that there has to be annual training involved in making sure that they keep up with their training and that they know how to fire the weapon, and keep in practice.
Yeah. So to get a concealed carry permit here in Colorado, there's a mandatory minimum of about 4 hours worth of training, and it's in-person training that has to be conducted. And then after that, as training is completed, that certificate's turned into the local sheriff's office, who then fingerprints the person, the applicant, and does an extensive background check going back several years, and that all gets sent off to the National Instant Criminal System, so the NICS system. So it's a very thorough process, and it vets out anyone who might have any past issues. So not only is it a background check, but also the fingerprints in addition to it. And then as part of the application process, too, there's other similar questions that do ask about drug use and other cases like that. So.
Okay. Now, we know Colorado, as I mentioned earlier, passed municipal marijuana back a couple years back, and that the state is still democratically controlled. You, of course, are a Republican. How do you have means of trying to get this legislation passed when you have Democrats in charge there in that state?
Well, it is an uphill battle, but I think I've definitely changed the conversation here. And so I think we're going to see a lot of people come out in support of this, and I think it's going to be surprising to most people. And then on top of that, our governor even came out and early, I think it was either late December or early January, and came out and said that we need to have this conversation, and he would be open to it. So if we've got support from even the Democratic governor, I think we very likely could get it passed through the Democrat-controlled state House, and then the Republicans control the state Senate here in Colorado.
It's very surprising how the political landscape is changing over in Colorado. It used to be Colorado at one time was a very blue state. Can you describe the political climate there now? Are Democrats now a little bit more inclined after the midterm elections to now want to legislate with you now?
It depends on the issue. Some issues no, some issues yes. I mean, a lot of it will depend on the actual committee. It gets, once it gets assigned to state affairs, if we can pull a few of them over. But they do tend to vote lockstep with each other on that committee. So it's definitely an uphill battle. But that's why I've created on my Facebook page, Patrick for Colorado. We have a petition up there, and we're just really encouraging folks to get on there and sign that petition so we can show a huge amount of support for this, and then maybe they might be more open to that idea.
Now, signing this petition, obviously you've put the legislation down. Do people have to go sign this petition for this legislation to even hit onto the Colorado state floor?
No, they do not. No, this is just simply for me as a legislator to say this is the amount of support I have for this bill, and actually have physical names written down.
So you can turn it into all your committees that you work with, and of course turn it into the governor's office and anyone else who wants to see those numbers of people who are supporting the petition per se and your legislation.
Correct.
Okay. Now I see here on your record that you served over in the Army, and you received a Bronze Star Medal. Was your joining of the military, did that have a lot to do with Columbine, or do you have very much of an very open military family? Because it's a really hard decision to go join the U.S. military, especially in this day of age.
Columbine had a major effect on my life. To be totally honest with you, I wasn't the greatest kid when I was 15 years old, and I was probably headed down the wrong path. And then when I saw friends of mine, when friends of mine did lose their lives in that tragedy, it really affected me and made me realize that there must be a reason out there that I was saved and that I'm still around. So I dedicated my life to serving a purpose shortly after that tragedy, and then that's a big reason why I joined the Army during a time of war, knowing I was going to deploy, and went and served in Solder City. And I guess I was lucky enough to have Chris Kyle looking over me over there in Solder City, so to find that out, it's kind of comforting to know that. But that's a big reason why I'm doing now. It's about a $30,000 a year job, so the money's not too enticing to do a job like this, but I feel that I'm really trying to do a service for the people.
Now, you of course served in the military, and I thank you for your service. By the way, we don't thank our veterans enough on this program. But what made you decide to run for as a Colorado State representative? What made you get into politics? Because obviously people look at you and say, why would a former military person who don't usually like politicians usually go after military people like you, why do you even want to get embroiled inside politics currently with the way the U.S. political system is right now?
Well, I had to get out of the Army because I was medically unfit to deploy anymore, and I figured if I couldn't deploy, then it was time for me to leave. So I left the Army, and I was working a job, and really just did miss that sense of purpose that I had when I was in the Army. And so when a lot of people approached me originally to ask about this, I said, heck no, go find someone else. And there was no way I was going to run. And then after lots of prayer and rather clear signs from God, and I decided I'd jump in, and that'd be a different way of serving. So, I may not wear the uniform now, but I guess it's a different way of serving.
Well, once a veteran, you're always a veteran, I believe there, Patrick. You mentioned that you were very hard against running for political office. What can you take us in your mind? What changed your mind to actually run for political office? Because that's not an easy decision, running for political office, because you got people who are against you, who don't want you to run. You bring your family into this. You're looked under like a microscope on your record. Down to what happened in your childhood. You mentioned you had problems in your youth, a small little traffic ticket, or a pullover by a cop. That's going to be over in the media like a haywire.
It is. I guess the big change for me was getting those signs from God, and then really the lack of bold leadership in a lot of levels of politics today. We're just really missing that. And so I think we need people that are going to sponsor bold ideas and move forward, and especially from a Republican perspective. I think we are in the state we are in because we haven't defined ourselves what we actually stand for. Instead, we're just trying to say we're not as bad as the other guys. So I want to actually bring forward an agenda of liberty and freedom and solid conservative values. And I think when you actually are bold, and as Ronald Reagan said, speak in bold colors, no pale pastels, it actually works politically. So I kind of wanted to be an example for that.
Now, some have said, and I've heard people comment about you, that you're more of a libertarian Ron Paul type of Republican. Now, I will state fully on this program, and I've stated it many a times, that I am a libertarian. I am not liking the direction that the Republican Party is currently going right now with the current House Speaker, John Boehner. And I know you can't comment too much on national politics, but right now as the Republican Party stands, what do you think of the Republican Party as it stands and how they're trying to tackle issues here in America?
No, I think they need to be more bold with it. I think we do have some solid heroes around the nation, from Justin Amash and Thomas Massey, and Rand Paul's doing a great job, and Ted Cruz. And then I do have I have a slight libertarian streak to me, and I use the word libertarian carefully because, even folks like Bill Maher would say he's a libertarian when I don't think he's anything of the sort. So, so I do use that word carefully, but definitely I'm again on a platform of liberty and freedom, and I think millennials in particular are really attracted to that message.
If you can expand a bit on some of your views, because some people are going to say, okay, libertarians, they really want to bring the military back home. They're opposed to any military intervention or us getting involved in any outside conflicts right now. Do you feel that same way, especially considering you used to serve over in the Army, or is it more have to do with the way our government runs that those some of your libertarian views, I'm not saying you're totally libertarian, but some of those libertarian views that you have, maybe you can expand on that and to explain to our audience a little bit on your views.
I guess nationally, I think my biggest concern with defense overall is our just ever-expanding debt. And quite frankly, the military is only as strong as the economy. And so if we don't have free market policies in place, we're never going to be able to afford a strong military. So that's my biggest concern. We need to actually bring that debt back down, and I think the military even could probably take a little bit of a cut. So it's a team effort to do that. So I think they can do it. They can do it smartly and not just focus on military cuts only. I think there's a lot of other government programs we can cut. But if we don't focus on that, then we're never going to be able to afford the strong military we have now.
Now, with our current president in office, he is cutting the military. He's made some pretty bad decisions, I think you would agree with. What is your current assessment of President Obama now? I know you only run a little small part over in the state of Colorado. But what do you think about him and how he's handling his foreign affairs right now, especially over in the Ukraine or over in Syria right now, where we're dealing with the likes of ISIS and the Russian rebels and the continuing threats that we're getting around the world?
I think he's been an embarrassment.
You're simply put. I like that. You just put it simply out there. You're very straightforward on that. I agree with you, especially now considering we're thinking about arming the Ukrainians. Do you agree with the possible decision that the Defense Department is thinking about, and if the president does decide to give the green light to this?
Well, I haven't looked into the actual policy too much to comment on that specifically, but I do say that we would probably have to tread very, very carefully before doing anything. That we see that with what's going on with ISIS right now. They're carrying our weapons that they obviously got from us, from when we got involved in other conflicts. So I think I don't want to say I would be totally against it because I haven't looked completely into it, but on the surface, probably not sound policy.
Okay, understood. I won't press you any further on that. Well, finally, before we let you go, you mentioned quite a few times during this interview that God is a very big inspiration in your life. Explain that to us a little bit on your belief in God and how He affects your decisions day in and day out.
Yeah, so I'm a strong Christian man, and I truly believe that the only way you can be a true Christian is accepting that within your heart. You can never be forced to be a Christian, and that's laid out very clearly in the Bible. And I think that's why Christianity and freedom and liberty go hand in hand.
Wow. Simply put, Patrick, I'm very surprised with you. We don't have many people who come on the air who are as honest and straightforward as you. You really put it out there. What is your future plans? Obviously, you've only got elected back in November 2014. Do you have future plans of expanding following your term over in Colorado politics? Do you have means of trying to go into the national scene and continuing to serve?
I don't have any plans right now. I think that this was really, I thought it was a calling from God, and that's why it's easy for me to be bold and straightforward. And I think that when people put their own personal ambition above the actual what they're the purpose they're serving is when they get into trouble. So as of right now, no, I don't have any, but not to say that I would never would.
Okay, now, Patrick, before I let you go, where is this legislation right now? Is it inside committee? What is the progress on it? And when can we expect to see a vote on this?
Well, right now it's just been assigned to a committee. It hasn't even been assigned a hearing date. And I'm actually trying to make sure that we can try to push that out just so that we can give a lot of these Columbine students who've spoken to me a chance to testify and speak their mind on it. But, again, I don't control that. That'll be the Democrats' the chairman of the committee. That'll be her choice, but I actually hope she does give everyone a fair voice and gives this bill its due hearing.
All right, State Representative Patrick Neville, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy day to join us here on the Evan-Miller Report, and you're welcome back anytime, sir. Please have your press person give us a call when that does end up coming up for a vote, or when people start speaking on the floor more about this issue. We honestly want to keep being kept up to date on this.
Okay, thanks for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that is Patrick Neville, State Representative in Colorado. He represents Castle Rock and, of course, is approaching the 16-year day of Columbine. He's a survivor as well of that shooting. Corey, just an inspirational interview right there. You don't normally see a young student like that who had a very tough time 1999 during Columbine, then decided to join the Army, and now has decided to become a state representative inside the state of Colorado. Certainly a great man right there, and we don't see these type of people very often.
No, we do not, and he put it absolutely correctly. Christianity and freedom hand in hand. Ladies and gentlemen, hope you listened on that one. I mean, absolutely. I support religious freedom and everything. You don't have to agree with us if you don't, but that's our stand on it, and we're sticking to it.
Absolutely right. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, later tonight, this podcast of this episode of the Evan-Miller Report will be available via Spreaker, iHeartRadio, and Pundit Press Radio. So if you missed any of this interview, it will be available for you to listen. All right, folks, let's go ahead and go over to Corey now. He has tonight's Lawsuits Across America.
And now it's time for Lawsuits Across America. The cases are real. All rise for the Honorable Corey Evans.
Yeah. Sit, people. We gotta get right into this. The very first bill filed by a Louisiana senator this year could impair the East Bank Levees Authority wetlands damages lawsuit against more than the 80 oil and gas companies, according to the levee board's supporters. The legislation's sponsor, Senator Brett Allain, said the bill is not meant to target the levee board lawsuit, though he declined to answer a question about whether the lawsuit was the inspiration for the bill, a technical piece of legislation that addresses property drainage issues and flooding. If the bill passed, it would make it more difficult for the levee authority to argue that damage done by the energy companies in coastal wetlands they own or control reduce the ability of levees to hold back storm surge moving over the land they controlled, according to the levee board and other lawyers. In its suit, the levee authority argues that because the energy companies are responsible for the present and future reductions in surge protection offered by the levees, they should either repair the wetlands or provide money to improve the levees. And I hope they pick one because, oh, for crying out loud, I hope that some of you learned something from Hurricane Katrina. Right, moving on to Atlantic City, the company the city hired to develop beach bars, an RV park, and other attractions is suing Wildwood for allegedly interfering with those plans. Point Break Group Management of Medford, Burlington County, filed a lawsuit last week in U.S. District Court in Philadelphia alleging the city conspired to undermine the company's efforts to enact its comprehensive beach plan. The two sides sued and countersued in 2013 in the state superior court. Now, Point Break is taking its complaint to a federal judge. City Solicitor Mary Darcy Bittner said Point Break failed to live up to the terms of its contract in 2013. As a result, the city filed a notice of breach of contract in 2013, its second with Point Break in as many years. The new suit accuses city officials of undermining Point Break's efforts.
All right, folks. Looks like we have lost Corey Evan again, and I do apologize. It seems like we are having trouble with our line of out of Los Angeles tonight. I do not know what the issue is tonight, but we are having issue with that tonight. So our apologies for that. Wow. But still, this interview with Patrick Neville earlier, just a couple minutes earlier, that was a great interview. To tell you what is coming up, though, tomorrow on the Evan-Miller Report, got a great show for you on tomorrow's program here. Join us tomorrow. One of the most influential commissioners here inside the United States, Commissioner Richard Washchild, will join us for an exclusive interview for the state of Maryland, where he will be talking to us about many topics, including Agenda 21, ICLEI, and the big bill that he is trying to fight against, the rain tax in his state. So join us tomorrow at 8 Eastern, 5 Pacific for the Evan-Miller Report here on the SHR Media Networks and Pundit Press Media as well here. And I believe we have Corey Evan back. So, my friend, looks like we had too many technical issues tonight, but hopefully we can get those fixed up for tomorrow's broadcast. So
yes, I will keep working on that. And just a note on my side of things, Jay, I am making improvements to my connection. I have just ordered new equipment, so essentially a new iPhone, because I broadcast from my iDevice, as some of you may have figured out by now. But yes, I have that on order now, and it should get here next week. And that should help solve at least a few of our connectivity problems.
Absolutely right. All right. Well, folks.
And on that note, ladies and gentlemen, I will post up all the stories I promised earlier on the Facebook page, facebook.com/The Evan-Miller Report, and I'll tweet them to you at EM Radio Report. Be sure to follow us on both of those. And again, ladies and gentlemen, I am so sorry, but this was not built to code.
Absolutely right. Well, ladies and gentlemen, that's what we call live radio. Sometimes this stuff happens. But at least we got the interview with Patrick Neville and Corey, and that was a great interview. So we hope people will listen to that on podcast tonight. And ladies and gentlemen, on that note, that is the Evan-Miller Report. For Corey Evan, I'm Jason Miller saying so long from Los Angeles and San Diego, and we'll talk to you tomorrow.